What if the most shocking thing about the Royal Variety Performance 2025 wasn't the talent on stage, but the person who never made it through the door? That's the question we start with. Because before a single spotlight turned on, before the orchestra warmed up, before Jason Manford took the stage with his usual mix of charm and barely contained mischief, something happened behind the scenes that almost no one was supposed to know about. And yet here we are, talking about the moment a Hollywood duchess allegedly tried to slip. No, force her way into the most tightly controlled royal entertainment event of the year. And the unexpected figure who shut it all down with one decision that stunned everyone involved. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's be honest for a second. If you heard that Meghan Markle tried to secure a last-minute, high-visibility paparazzi bolt-on ticket for the Royal Variety Performance 2025, would you even be surprised? Or would you raise an eyebrow, shake your head, and think, of course she did? Because that's the strange reality of her public image now, where every move feels both predictable and still somehow shocking. And that contradiction is exactly where our story begins. Think about it. This is the Royal Variety Performance, an event dripping with British tradition, carefully curated to balance royal dignity with entertainment spectacle. It's the night comedians, singers, actors, dancers, and global icons gather under one roof to raise money, honor heritage, and dazzle an audience that includes members of the royal family. It's prestigious. It's formal. It's respected. It is not, under any circumstances, meant to be a personal PR battleground. Yet someone allegedly tried to turn it into one. Before we dive into the bizarre series of phone calls, frantic emails, backstage whispers, and panicked staff meetings, let's pause and ask a simple question. Why this event? Why now? Why would Meghan Markle, a woman who once walked red carpets with Hollywood royalty, who once stood alongside actual royal family members on official engagements, suddenly be chasing a ticket? No, hunting a ticket to a show she hasn't been associated with for years. What changed? What was she trying to gain? What was she trying to prove? Because events like this don't exist in a vacuum. They exist within a climate, a tone, a shifting public mood. And in 2025, that mood around Meghan wasn't what it used to be. Let's be honest. Her reputation had been taking hit after hit. PR stumbles, failed projects, rumors of tension with studios, social media backlash that felt both relentless and strangely inevitable. A growing perception that her star power wasn't what it once was, at least not without the royal connection that once boosted everything she touched. And in Hollywood, the moment your shine starts to dim, you feel it. Hard. Publicists feel it. Agents feel it. And yes, sometimes the celebrity feels it most of all. So imagine, just for a moment, the emotional stakes, the frustration, the pressure, the desperate desire to reclaim relevance, to be seen, to be photographed, to be talked about. Not as a former working royal, not as a controversial figure, but as a star, someone important, someone who belongs. Now imagine hearing that the Royal Variety Performance 2025, a glittering, globally televised, red carpet-saturated event, was about to generate the kind of media buzz Meghan hadn't enjoyed in a long time. Cameras, reporters, international coverage. The perfect stage to re-emerge. The perfect moment to show the world she still had access, influence, and visibility. Except there was one problem. She wasn't invited. And this year, invitations were more limited than ever. Because 2025 wasn't just another show, it was the first royal variety after several major shakeups inside the monarchy. Security was tighter, protocol stricter, media access heavily monitored, and hosts were given more control than they had in previous years, including veto power over certain red carpet and backstage elements. Which brings us straight to Jason Manford. Let's talk about him for a second, because he's the unexpected center of this entire situation. Jason isn't the kind of person who normally finds himself in the middle of royal drama. He's known for his quick humor, his affability, his grounded energy. The guy who can make a whole theater laugh and still seem like the sort of person you could bump into at Tesco and talk to about the weather. That's his charm. That's why audiences love him. And that's why producers trust him. But that trust came with responsibility. And this year, as host, Jason had a level of authority that most people, including Meghan, apparently didn't expect. So when whispers began circulating backstage that someone was attempting to secure a last-minute paparazzi bolt-on pass, essentially a turbocharged ticket that guaranteed maximum red carpet visibility, staffers were confused. These passes weren't casual. They weren't easily obtained. They were monitored, limited, and usually reserved for very specific purposes. But then came the name that stopped the room cold: Meghan Markle. And this wasn't just a request for attendance. This was a request specifically tied to the red carpet, specifically tied to visibility, specifically tied to cameras. Do you see the tension forming here? Because if you're a producer, you start imagining headlines. If you're security, you start preparing for crowd shifts. If you're part of the palace liaison team, you start sweating. And if you're Jason Manford, the host responsible for maintaining both the tone and smooth running of the night, you suddenly find yourself in the middle of a situation you never asked for. But let's go deeper. Why would Meghan seek a paparazzi bolt-on instead of a standard ticket? That detail matters. Bolt-ons guarantee what normal tickets don't: close-range camera positioning, bespoke arrival coverage, and a level of media access designed to maximize celebrity exposure. It is, in other words, a red carpet power move, a visibility strategy, a way to ensure that if you walk that carpet, even without a formal invite, your presence cannot be ignored. But here's the issue. The royal variety red carpet isn't like the Oscars. It isn't a free-for-all. It isn't built to accommodate personal PR campaigns. It's curated, structured, shielded. And anyone who tries to circumvent that structure is seen as a potential disruption, not an addition. So when Meghan's inquiry, allegedly made through intermediaries, landed on the wrong desk at the wrong time, it set off a chain reaction that nobody could have predicted. Someone passed the message to a producer. The producer forwarded it to a director. The director flagged it to the palace liaison. And somehow, in a twist of fate almost too ironic to script, it ended up in front of Jason Manford. And Jason's reaction? That's where things get interesting. Because according to people present that day, his response wasn't confusion. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even hesitation. It was a clear, immediate, almost instinctive: no, absolutely not. But why? Why would a comedian, someone far outside royal politics, be so firm, so certain, so decisive? Was it fear of controversy? Was it a desire to protect the event? Was it humor masking seriousness? Or was it something more personal? These are the questions that started swirling behind the scenes as staff members realized Jason wasn't playing around. His tone was final. His decision was unwavering. And his stance set off a quiet storm across the production team. But that wasn't the end. Because Meghan's team didn't stop. They didn't walk away. And they didn't abandon the attempt. No. What happened next escalated everything, intensified the confusion, and turned a simple request into a backstage crisis that the public was never supposed to hear about. That moment, Meghan's next move, is where this story takes a dramatic turn. A turn so unexpected that even the producers, who'd seen every kind of celebrity ego and red carpet stunt imaginable, were left staring at each other in disbelief. Because just when everyone thought the situation had settled, it didn't. In fact, it was only beginning. And what Meghan tried next would push this already tense situation into full-blown chaos, setting the stage for a confrontation that no one saw coming. The part where everything shifts? That comes next. What if everything you thought you understood about the royal variety performance was wrong? What if the glittering smiles, the polished speeches, the flawless television broadcast were just the surface layer of a night fueled by tension, power struggles, whispered threats, and last-minute crises that never make it to the public? And what if this particular year, 2025, was the year when everything underneath finally cracked? That's the question Chapter 1 forces us to confront. Because before Jason Manford blocked Meghan Markle, before the paparazzi bolt-on scandal, before the frantic phone calls and the leaked whispers, the stage was already set. The atmosphere was already electric. The stakes were already higher than anyone could admit publicly. And if you don't understand that tension, if you don't understand why 2025 mattered so much, then you can't understand why Meghan's attempt to enter that world hit like a thunderstorm nobody was prepared for. So let's start with the truth. 2025 was never going to be a normal year for the royal variety performance. Not with the state of the monarchy. Not with the public mood. Not with the cultural climate. And definitely not with the eyes of the world watching for cracks, mistakes, and missteps. Now let me ask you something directly. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately known something was off? Even before anyone said a word? That uneasy silence? That tension under the surface? That's what the Royal Variety organizers felt this year. Long before Meghan even entered the picture. Long before her name was whispered backstage. Long before Jason Manford became the unexpected gatekeeper of a storm he never asked for. Because from the very beginning, this particular show was designed to be a reset, a recalibration, a statement piece, a reassurance to the public that tradition was still intact, dignity was still present, and the royal family could still deliver spectacle without scandal. After a turbulent few years, health scares, controversies, internal fractures, it was essential that this event be flawless. But flawless requires control, and control requires vigilance. And vigilance means shutting out anything that might jeopardize the tightrope they were walking. Which is exactly why Meghan Markle's attempted entrance, even before Jason blocked it, wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous to the image they were trying to rebuild. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to understand the atmosphere first. Imagine the iconic theater. Velvet seats, gold moldings, polished marble floors, red carpets that have been walked by everyone from Elton John to Ed Sheeran. Imagine the production teams, hundreds of them, rushing around with headsets, clipboards, earpieces. Imagine the performers rehearsing backstage, dancers stretching, musicians tuning, comedians testing timing. Imagine the broadcast engineers checking every camera, every microphone, every light. Everything matters. Every cue. Every second, every detail. Because this is the Royal Variety performance, not a Hollywood awards show that can rely on chaos for drama. This is about precision. This is about expectations. This is about legacy. And above all, it's about the monarchy's image, their prestige, their stability, their aura. Now consider this. In 2025, the palace was under pressure like never before. Public scrutiny was relentless. Critics were louder. Supporters were more defensive, and every event, every visit, every speech, every public appearance was dissected, analyzed, judged. They couldn't risk overshadowing. They couldn't risk controversy. They couldn't risk a PR ambush. So when producers sat down in early spring to plan the Royal Variety performance, the guideline was crystal clear. Keep everything under control. Avoid unpredictability. Prevent outside distractions. If you're thinking that sounds hostile to chaos, good. Because chaos kills broadcasts. Chaos kills reputations. Chaos kills trust. And what does Meghan Markle represent in 2025? Chaos. Unpredictability. Media storms. Is that fair? Maybe. Maybe not. But perception beats fairness every time, especially in royal optics. The committee knew it. Producers knew it. Security definitely knew it. So yes, tensions were high even before her name appeared on an inquiry list. But what exactly made 2025 uniquely high stakes? Let's break it down. First, a major royal family member was scheduled to attend. Someone whose recent public appearances were rare. Someone the press had been hungry for updates about. Someone whose presence alone guaranteed headlines. This meant the palace needed things to run smoothly. Not a single photo bomb. Not a single misplaced camera flash. Not a single unexpected arrival. Second, the guest list was stacked with global megastars, artists who brought massive international attention. This was a chance for the UK to show unity, glamour, and cultural strength. The spotlight was harsh. No missteps allowed. Third, several charitable partners were depending on this event to boost visibility and funding. The stakes weren't just royal, they were financial. And the fourth reason? The one few people know? This year included a subtle but significant shift. Hosts were given more influence over backstage and red carpet protocol. Not total control, just more say than usual. Enough to make decisions that could shape the night. Which brings us, inevitably, to Jason Manford. But not yet. Because to understand Jason's reaction later, you need to understand the environment he walked into. He wasn't just hired to be funny. He wasn't just hired to host. He was hired to be the stabilizing force, the tone setter, the man who keeps the audience comfortable, the performers relaxed, and the broadcast dignified. He needed to be witty, but not risky. Charismatic, but not controversial. Warm, but not informal. Accessible, but not sloppy. Do you see how carefully calibrated that is? The palace expects hosts to embody a very specific energy, and Jason fit the criteria perfectly. He wasn't a political flashpoint. He wasn't tabloid poison. He wasn't someone who invited drama. He was safe. He was trusted. He was reliable. That made him a cornerstone of the entire event. And that's why the production team guarded his environment so tightly. His backstage area, his rehearsal times, his security bubble. Anything unpredictable around him became a liability. Now ask yourself, how would Meghan Markle, one of the most polarizing women on the planet, fit into this environment? Would her presence recenter media attention on herself? Would photographers shift focus? Would social media dominate the night with commentary unrelated to the performers? Would critics accuse the palace of mixed messaging? Would supporters accuse Jason of disrespect if he didn't acknowledge her? Would detractors accuse the event of hypocrisy if they did? You see where this is going. Her presence wasn't just a complication. It was a risk, a huge one. And this is where the emotional contradiction sits. The royal variety performance is supposed to be about entertainment, but in 2025, it was really about optics. It was really about narrative control. It was really about symbolism. Now imagine being on the production team. Imagine being one of the staff members checking arrival lists, cross-referencing VIP passes, reviewing red carpet access logs. Imagine your face when a name appears that you didn't expect, couldn't approve, and weren't prepared for. A name that threatened everything you'd been told to protect. Meghan Markle. No invitation. No clearance. No approval from the palace. But a request. Oh yes, a very specific request, for a type of ticket almost no one uses. A paparazzi bolt-on. If you're imagining gasps, shocked stares, frantic whispers, you're right. But before the drama, before the panic, before the phone calls that would drag Jason Manford directly into the storm, there was silence. A silence filled with disbelief. Because up until that moment, nobody imagined this event would be on her radar. But now that her name was there, the countdown to chaos had officially begun. And what producers discovered next, what happened after that first inquiry, would push them into a situation they weren't prepared to handle. Because Meghan's initial request wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the next move she made would shake the entire production. What if the real power at a royal event isn't held by the monarch, the producers, or even the palace itself, but by the comedian hired to keep the audience laughing? Strange question, right? But Chapter 2 begins with exactly that contradiction, because in 2025, during the most controlled, most delicate, most tightly monitored royal variety performance in years, Jason Manford unexpectedly found himself holding a level of influence Meghan Markle never anticipated. And it wasn't because he demanded it. It wasn't because he craved authority. It wasn't even because he had some secret rivalry with her. No, it was because the structure of the night, the pressure behind the scenes, and the fragile tone of the monarchy had accidentally positioned him as the last line of defense. So let me ask you a direct question. Did you ever imagine a comedian, a man known for jokes, relatability, and warm-hearted charm, would one day stand between Meghan Markle and a red carpet she was determined to walk? Because that's exactly what happened. But before we get to the moment Jason said no, we need to understand why he had the power to say it. Because it wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. And it definitely wasn't an accident. It was structure. It was protocol. It was a year of behind-the-scenes decisions that placed Jason at the center of everything. Let's rewind to the start of the year. Months before the show, when the Royal Variety Production Committee gathered to discuss a major problem. The monarchy needed a successful event. Not an okay one. Not a decent one. A flawless one. A night with no scandals, no surprises, no negative headlines. One wrong moment could overshadow the entire program, derail public confidence, and create an international media storm. So the committee made a bold decision: increase host authority. Not publicly, not in a flashy way, but structurally. Behind the scenes, the host would be given special control over the tone, timing, backstage movement, and, most importantly, red carpet integration. Why? Because hosts determine pacing. They determine energy. They determine how smooth the broadcast feels. And if something unpredictable disrupted that flow, The host needed authority to shut it down immediately. This meant Jason Manford, by the time he signed his contract, had more influence than almost any previous host in decades. Now here's where things get interesting. Jason didn't ask for more power. He didn't flaunt it. He didn't even talk about it. But the producers knew. The palace knew. And the event directors definitely knew. They needed a stabilizing force. Someone who could keep the night grounded while appearing effortlessly lighthearted. Someone who could keep the audience comfortable, the performers confident, and the monarchy firmly in the spotlight. Jason was perfect. And here's the irony. Meghan Markle had no idea any of this was in place when she allegedly attempted her red carpet maneuver. She saw the royal variety performance through a different lens, a glamorous, international, red carpet-heavy event with massive media turnout and enormous visibility potential. In Hollywood terms, it looked like an opportunity, a stage, a moment. But to Jason, it was responsibility, pressure, a duty to maintain order. He wasn't thinking about celebrity. He wasn't thinking about drama. He wasn't thinking about who could generate headlines. He was thinking about timing, rehearsal blocks, security schedules, seating arrangements, stage cues, comedic pacing, and, perhaps most importantly, the palace's strict sensitivity about overshadowing their chosen guest of honor. That's the quiet truth most people don't know. The host isn't just a smile for the camera. They're part of the machinery that keeps the entire event from collapsing in real time. Now let's dig deeper into Jason himself. Because if you don't understand his personality, you won't understand why his reaction to Meghan's request was so decisive. Jason Manford is known for three things. His friendliness. He's approachable, grounded, and beloved by audiences who see him as one of us. His sense of responsibility. He takes professionalism seriously, perhaps more seriously than people assume from a comedian. His boundary setting, something fans love about him. He doesn't sugarcoat disrespect or manipulation. He's not cruel. He's not petty. He's not dramatic. But he has a limit. And as the royal variety producers would later discover, Meghan's team accidentally crossed it. Let's picture the scene. It's a week before the show. Jason is running through monologue drafts, practicing timing, coordinating with the orchestra, and rehearsing introductions for performers. He's relaxed, focused, in work mode, not celebrity mode. Then a producer approaches him with a concerned look, holding a printed inquiry, the request for a paparazzi bolt-on ticket associated with Meghan Markle. Jason's reaction wasn't shock. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't curiosity. It was irritation, the quiet, grounded kind that says, "Why is this even being brought to me?" Because he understood instantly what this could mean. He understood that such a high-visibility arrival would dominate the media narrative, overshadowing the actual performers, overshadowing the royal attendees, overshadowing the tone he was hired to maintain. He also understood that the palace would not want this, that producers would not want this, that the event's charity partners would not want this, that performers, many of whom had traveled internationally for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, would not want this. A surprise Meghan Markle arrival? That would become the entire story. And Jason wasn't willing to let that happen on his watch. But here's where the contradiction hits hardest. Jason didn't dislike Meghan personally. He didn't have a grudge. He didn't have an agenda. He had a job, a massive job, and the appearance of someone as polarizing and high-intensity as Meghan threatened everything he had spent months preparing for. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in charge of something important? A project, an event, a performance? And suddenly someone tries to insert themselves into it, knowing full well their presence could derail the whole thing? That's exactly how Jason felt. Protective, focused, dutiful. And when he learned that Meghan's team wasn't just requesting access, but requesting an enhanced red carpet pass designed for maximum media exposure, that sealed it. Because the paparazzi bolt-on isn't subtle. It isn't accidental. It isn't background access. It's full exposure. It's intentional visibility. It's a spotlight grab. And that was the one thing Jason could not allow. So he said no. Not casually. Not timidly. But firmly. Calmly. Decisively. A decision that rippled through the entire production staff like a shockwave. Because when a host vetoes something of this magnitude, everyone takes it seriously. Yet the real twist, the one that would light the fuse of the coming chaos, wasn't Jason's refusal. It was Meghan's response. Because instead of accepting the decision, her team allegedly shifted tactics. The inquiry didn't stop. It mutated. It evolved. It grew more persistent, more creative, more complicated. And with each attempt, pressure grew behind the scenes. Suddenly, Jason found himself not just a host, but a gatekeeper, a protector of the event, a barrier standing between stability and a media explosion. And that's when the real tension began. Because what Meghan tried next would turn a backstage rumor into a full-blown crisis. And nobody, not Jason, not the producers, not the security team, was prepared for it. What happens when someone who's been told no decides that no doesn't apply to them? That's where Chapter 3 begins, with a question that cuts straight to the heart of the tension behind Meghan Markle's sudden interest in the Royal Variety Performance 2025. Because if you think this was just about attending a show, you're missing the entire emotional undercurrent of the moment. This wasn't about entertainment. This wasn't about charity. This wasn't about nostalgia. This was about visibility and desperation wrapped in the polished smile of opportunity. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever watched someone try to claw their way back into relevance, even if it means stepping into a space they once walked confidently but no longer belonged to? That strange mixture of ambition, fear, ego, and vulnerability? That's the energy surrounding Meghan in 2025. Not publicly. Publicly, she maintained poise, warmth, that carefully curated California glow, but behind the scenes, behind the PR statements, behind the smiling Instagram posts, something was off. Something was shifting. Something in the Hollywood machine wasn't working the way it used to. Because let's look at the wider picture for a moment. By 2025, Meghan's brand had become turbulent. The early post-royal years, full of streaming deals, book announcements, interviews, and production ventures, had settled into a quieter, more stagnant period. Projects stalled. Partnerships fizzled. Public interest dipped. Social media comments grew harsher. Media coverage grew colder. Even late-night hosts, the ones who used to applaud her boldness, had begun making subtle jokes at her expense. Hollywood has a short memory, and the spotlight she once commanded effortlessly was now dimming. But here's the twist. Meghan felt it. She wasn't oblivious. She wasn't detached. She wasn't floating above the noise. She was acutely, painfully aware. And awareness breeds strategy. Strategy breeds risk. And risk, especially when mixed with ego, can lead to questionable decisions. So when Meghan heard about the Royal Variety Performance 2025, an event guaranteed to generate global press, trending hashtags, celebrity coverage, royal family scrutiny, and glamorous red carpet photos, it wasn't just appealing. It was irresistible. Think about what this event symbolizes. It's not just entertainment. It's prestige. It's legacy. It's British culture wrapped in velvet curtains and glittering chandeliers. It's exactly the kind of stage Meghan once walked as a working royal. Back when her public image was at its peak. Back when the world couldn't get enough of her. Back when photographers couldn't stop clicking. Back when the palace still counted her as an asset instead of a liability. Imagine that contrast. Imagine standing outside the world you once belonged to, watching it sparkle without you. Would you feel excluded? Would you feel replaced? Would you feel the urge to remind the world that you still matter? Those questions matter. Because they're the emotional fuel behind everything Meghan allegedly did next. Let's go deeper. Sources close to her team, the anonymous Hollywood insiders who always seem to whisper when drama brews, claimed that Meghan had been searching for a perfect re-entry moment. Something polished, something respectable, something that couldn't be dismissed as a publicity grab. But the problem with the Royal Variety Performance? It was invitation only, palace approved, strictly managed. And Meghan wasn't on the list, at least not officially. But instead of accepting that, instead of letting the moment pass, instead of staying detached and above the fray, Meghan allegedly became even more determined. The idea of appearing on that red carpet, cameras flashing, reporters scrambling, social media erupting, was too potent to let go. It was the perfect visual, the perfect statement, the perfect reassertion of her place in the narrative. Except she didn't want a normal ticket. She didn't want a quiet entrance. She didn't want a background presence. She wanted impact. She wanted visibility. She wanted spectacle. That's why she went for the paparazzi bolt-on ticket, the kind of access used by celebrities who need to be captured, The kind of access that guarantees photographers will turn their lenses toward you the moment you arrive. The kind that creates headlines even if you're not officially part of the event. Here's the irony. Meghan built a public persona on rejecting the toxicity of the media, rejecting invasive photographers, rejecting being hounded by cameras, rejecting the pressure of constant visibility. Yet here she was, allegedly chasing the same thing she claimed to despise. Contradiction? Absolutely. But contradictions drive drama, and drama drives stories, and stories keep you visible. This wasn't about attending the show. It was about reclaiming a narrative that had slipped away. Now let's talk about the mood inside her team. Because for weeks leading up to the event, there were whispers about tension behind the scenes, disagreements about which direction Meghan should go, how she should present herself, whether she should lean into Hollywood or maintain her philanthropic duchess image. Some wanted glamour. Some wanted activism. Some wanted reinvention. Meghan wanted everything at once. And the royal variety performance represented an opportunity that could serve multiple narratives: charitable, glamorous, royal adjacent, high profile, and international. But here's where the emotional twist comes in. Meghan wasn't just chasing visibility. She was chasing validation. The kind of validation she once received effortlessly. The kind that made headlines by simply stepping out of a car. The kind that comes from proximity to power, especially royal power. And yet, no matter how much she wanted this moment, no matter how much she tried to justify the request as harmless, no matter how much she convinced herself that her appearance would be celebrated, deep down, she must have known the truth. The palace didn't want her there. The producers didn't want her there. The event wasn't designed for unpredictable arrivals. The monarchy didn't want distractions. And Hollywood? Even Hollywood didn't seem eager to rally behind her. But when someone feels cornered, when someone feels their grip on public attention slipping, they don't always make rational decisions. They make emotional ones, strategic ones, risky ones, and sometimes desperate ones. That's how Meghan's inquiry was born. Through intermediaries, quietly, cautiously, discreetly. But not discreet enough. Because someone on her team underestimated the world she was stepping into. They thought entertainment industry norms applied here. They thought influence and celebrity cachet would open doors. Instead, they triggered alarms. And when the inquiry reached the wrong set of eyes, someone who understood both the stakes and the consequences, everything shifted. Because while Meghan was thinking opportunity, Jason Manford was thinking responsibility. While she was thinking about cameras, he was thinking about chaos. While she was thinking about a comeback, he was thinking about the event collapsing into scandal. Two completely different motivations colliding in one moment. And yet, the real twist, the one that would escalate the situation into full-blown backstage turmoil, wasn't that Meghan tried to get in. It was what she did after she was told no. Because you'd think the refusal would end it. You'd think the conversation would stop there. You'd think she'd accept the boundary. But she didn't. What she tried next was far bolder, far riskier, far more complicated. And it made Jason realize that this wasn't just a request. It was a pressure campaign. And that pressure? It was about to explode. What do you call a ticket so powerful, so controversial, and so rare that even A-list celebrities whisper about it like it's a forbidden artifact? What do you call a pass that can turn a quiet arrival into a full-blown media spectacle with a single flash of a camera? What do you call the one thing Meghan Markle allegedly tried to secure, twice, in her attempt to step onto the royal variety red carpet? You call it the paparazzi bolt-on. And Chapter 4 begins with that object. The tiny, discreet, deceptively simple add-on that carries enough influence to reshape an entire event. Most people don't know it exists. Most celebrities will never touch it. Most producers avoid discussing it publicly. Why? Because it's the kind of thing that, if used correctly, creates magic, and if abused, creates chaos. So let me ask you this. If you had a ticket that practically guaranteed headlines, would you use it? Would you chase that kind of power, knowing it could put you back in the center of the global spotlight? Or would you walk away, choosing dignity over attention? Meghan, allegedly, chose the first option. But before we dissect her motives, we need to understand what a paparazzi bolt-on actually is. Because this isn't your standard red carpet pass. This isn't the kind of ticket you buy, hand over at the gate, and stroll in with. This isn't a VIP, VVP, or Friends of Production slot. This is exposure. Pure, curated, engineered exposure. A backstage-crafted mechanism designed to give a celebrity maximum visibility at a major event. And it's not available to just anyone. You can't request it on a website. You can't apply for it publicly. You can't buy it through connections alone. These bolt-ons are offered selectively. For promotional reasons, for contractual obligations, for media partnerships. But they're also heavily restricted because of one key factor. They manipulate the organic flow of press coverage. If a journalist sees a star walk a carpet with a bolt-on, that star gets photographed. No exceptions. No missed moments. No. Oops, the cameras were pointed the other way. A paparazzi bolt-on is like holding a remote control that rewires the attention of the entire press line. That's why producers hate them. That's why royalty avoids them. That's why palace advisors discourage them. Because visibility isn't neutral. Visibility can hijack the narrative of an event. Visibility can overshadow the cause, the purpose, the performers, the honored guests. Visibility can turn a charity gala into a circus. And so the question becomes, why did Meghan Markle want one? Let's explore the psychology, the strategy, and the emotional roots. First, the psychology. A paparazzi bolt-on offers something Meghan used to command effortlessly: attention. When she first joined the royal family, cameras followed her every step. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. Her presence generated headlines simply because she existed in that space. But by 2025, that effortless visibility wasn't there anymore. She was still talked about, yes, but not with the same glamour, not with the same admiration, not with the same intensity. If public attention is a currency, Meghan was running low. A bolt-on was a shortcut, a refill, a guaranteed headline generator. Next, the strategy. Meghan has always understood how optics shape power. A single impactful image, one iconic photo of her on the royal variety red carpet, could have reignited interest in her brand. It could have reframed her as glamorous, connected, and relevant. It could have overshadowed recent criticism and restored a sense of control over her narrative. Walking that carpet would have said, "I still belong. I still matter. You can't ignore me." And finally, the emotional roots, perhaps the most important piece. Walking the royal variety red carpet would not just be a PR move. It would be a symbolic homecoming, a return to a world she left behind, a world that shut her out, a world that moved forward without her, a world she once commanded but could no longer access. That's the power of the paparazzi bolt-on. It wasn't just an add-on. It was an emotional statement. Now let's shift perspective. Imagine being in the production office when that inquiry came in. Imagine the confusion. Imagine the disbelief. Imagine the immediate flurry of activity as phones buzzed, emails were forwarded, and staff members exchanged wide-eyed looks. Because here's the thing, the bolt-on itself wasn't the issue. It's rare, but not scandalous. The name attached to it was the issue. Meghan Markle's request wasn't neutral. It wasn't low stakes. It wasn't simple. Her arrival would completely reshape the red carpet. The press line would shift. The audience reaction would shift. The palace guest moment would be overshadowed. The performer's spotlight would be overshadowed. The host would be dragged into a political maelstrom. And then there was the biggest concern of all, the palace. Events involving the monarchy aren't structured like Hollywood premieres. They don't appreciate unpredictability. They don't allow unapproved arrivals. The red carpet is choreographed, and any disruption, especially from someone who left the royal family under a cloud of controversy, would ignite a firestorm. This is why the paparazzi bolt-on request wasn't just denied. It was escalated. And that's how it landed in Jason Manford's hands. Now, here's something most people don't realize. Hosts rarely get involved in ticketing politics. They're performers, not gatekeepers. Their job is to entertain the audience, not police the door. But 2025 was different, and Jason was given unusual oversight to ensure the broadcast wasn't overshadowed by external drama. The committee wanted stability. They wanted control. They wanted a host who could protect the tone of the night. Jason was that host, and when he saw Meghan's request, he didn't see a glamorous arrival. He saw a threat to the event structure. He saw a risk to the red carpet. He saw a move that could hijack the entire narrative. He saw chaos. But while Jason's reaction was firm, immediate, and final, Meghan's camp interpreted the refusal differently. They didn't see it as a denial. They saw it as an obstacle. a challenge, something to maneuver around. And that's when everything shifted. Because Meghan's inquiry wasn't the end. It was the first step. Her team returned. But this time, they didn't ask politely. They strategized. They recalibrated. They attempted a different route, one far more daring. And what they tried next would move the situation from difficult to dangerous. Because a bolt-on request could be denied quietly. But the next move Meghan's camp made? That one couldn't be ignored. What happens when a single name on a backstage inquiry list sends an entire production team into silent panic? That's the question Chapter 5 opens with. Because the moment Meghan Markle's request for a paparazzi bolt-on crossed the threshold of the Royal Variety Performance 2025 production office, the atmosphere didn't shift gently. It snapped. It tightened. It took on a strange, electric heaviness, the kind that makes even seasoned professionals glance at each other like, are we really doing this? And if you've ever worked behind the scenes at a high-profile event, you know that feeling. That instant where something unexpected appears in the system. Something that doesn't belong. Something that has the potential to derail months of preparation. That's exactly what happened when staff saw Meghan's name. Not because of personal opinion. Not because of gossip. But because of the implications. So let me ask you a direct question. If you were producing the most sensitive royal-adjacent event of the year, and someone whose name still triggers global headlines suddenly tried to get in through an unofficial route, how calm would you be? Not very calm. Not very calm at all. Because the issue wasn't simply that Meghan wasn't invited. The issue was that her presence, planned or unplanned, carried risks nobody wanted to gamble with. Let's walk into that room for a moment. Picture it clearly. A long table, stacks of production schedules, security rosters, camera placements, seating charts carefully organized for royal protocol, monitors showing rehearsal footage, directors pacing, assistants checking earpieces, runners delivering last-minute updates. Everything neat, everything controlled, everything stable. And then a production assistant approaches the table holding a printed inquiry, a small piece of paper. One's glance is all it takes to change the mood. Meghan Markle, request for paparazzi bolt-on. Silence. A slow, collective inhale. Someone mutters, this can't be real. Another asks, who submitted this? A third whispers, why now? Why here? Because here's what the production committee understood instantly. This wasn't just a ticket request. This was a narrative bomb. And if it went off, it wouldn't just overshadow performers. It would overshadow the monarchy's entire presence at the event. So the committee went into crisis mode. Let's break down the reaction. First, absolute confusion. No one could understand why Meghan would want to attend this event, of all events. She hadn't been connected to the Royal Variety Performance since her working royal days. She wasn't promoting anything tied to the show. She had no formal relationship with the organizers, the broadcasters, or the performers. Her request came out of nowhere, and anything unexpected at a royal-adjacent event is a red flag. Second, security concerns. The Royal Variety isn't run like the BAFTAs or the SAG Awards. Access is controlled with military-style precision because high-ranking royals attend. Security teams need to know every face, every entrance, every vehicle, every camera. A surprise VIP arrival is a logistical nightmare. It opens vulnerabilities. Now imagine someone as polarizing as Meghan trying to enter without official clearance. Security teams immediately flag this as a potential disruption. Not a threat, but a disruption. And disruptions are fatal to royal protocol events. Third, image management fears. Producers worried about the press. Because if Meghan showed up, photographers would swarm her. Reporters would pivot. Hashtags would explode. Commentators would drop everything to analyze her outfit, her expressions, her proximity to royal attendees. And the story would no longer be about the show, or the performers, or the charity, or the monarchy. It would be about her. The palace liaison team understood this deeply. They knew the optics. They knew the fallout. They knew the media appetite for Sussex-related drama, and they absolutely could not allow it. Fourth, who let this through? The committee started scrambling to figure out how this inquiry made it into their system. Was it an official request? Back channel? A PR firm acting on her behalf? A stylist? A publicist? A private assistant? The lack of clarity made it even worse, because unofficial requests are more difficult to manage than official ones. They slip through cracks. They bypass formal approval. They create gray areas that can lead to mistakes. And in an event like this, gray areas are deadly. Fifth, what about the royal guest of honor? This was the turning point. Because the committee needed to answer one critical question. Would Meghan's unexpected arrival create an awkward situation for the senior royal attending the performance? Would it create headlines suggesting conflict? Would it spark comparisons? Would it reignite the toxic narratives that the palace had spent months trying to silence? The answer? Yes, to all of the above. And that meant the committee had no choice. They needed a firm decision, a final answer, a unified stance. Which brings us to the most important part. Sixth, the decision reached the host, Jason Manford, not because he was the one who should decide whether Meghan could attend, but because the new 2025 guidelines gave him unusual authority over red carpet logistics. He wasn't just an entertainer. He was a stabilizer, a tone setter, a guardian of the event's flow. Anything that threatened to throw that flow off had to go through him. So the committee forwarded the request, attached notes, sent explanations, asked for his input, and waited. This moment matters, because it reveals how serious the situation had become. You don't bother the host with ticket requests unless the stakes are enormous. And Jason's reaction? You've already seen it. Firm, immediate, unambiguous. Absolutely not. Those two words became the backbone of the production committee's response. But here's what the public didn't see. The emotional reaction inside that room once Jason made his position clear. Relief. That's what they felt first. Relief that someone with authority was willing to take the responsibility. But the relief didn't last long. Because within hours, a second message came through. Another attempt. Another request. Another angle. This wasn't going away. Meghan's team wasn't stopping. And the production committee realized they weren't dealing with a simple misunderstanding. They were dealing with a campaign. That realization triggered the next phase. Damage control mode. Internal calls. Emergency chats. Emails marked urgent, confidential. Meetings rescheduled. Security briefings updated. Because now the committee wasn't just responding to a request. They were preparing for escalation. And they were right to prepare, because what came next pushed every alarm inside the building into overdrive. Meghan's team began exploring a back channel. Not through production. Not through palace liaisons. Not through official access routes. A side route. A loophole. A path that bypassed the main approval chain. And the moment the committee discovered that, chaos truly began. Because they weren't just fighting a request anymore. They were fighting a strategy. A strategy that would soon reach Jason Manford again. And force him into a confrontation he never imagined he'd have. What do you do when the person hired to make people laugh suddenly becomes the only barrier between a calm, polished royal event and a PR hurricane coming straight at the door? That's exactly where Chapter 6 begins, with Jason Manford standing at the uncomfortable crossroads of professionalism, responsibility, unwanted authority, and an incoming problem he never asked for. Because while the production committee was panicking, while security teams were recalculating, while palace liaisons were whispering frantically into earpieces, one truth became unavoidable. Everything now hinged on Jason. Not the king. Not advisors. Not producers. Jason, the comedian. Jason, the host. Jason, the man whose job was supposed to be cracking jokes and keeping the broadcast smooth, not blocking a Hollywood duchess from storming the red carpet. So let's ask the big question. How did Jason Manford, of all people, end up with the power to shut Meghan Markle down? And more importantly, why did he choose to use it? To understand the answer, we need to step deeper into his mindset, his role, and the growing pressure around him. Because Jason wasn't just reacting emotionally. He wasn't irritated for personal reasons. He wasn't trying to be a hero or a headline. He was doing something far simpler, far purer. He was protecting the event. Now imagine Jason's reality that week. He's rehearsing his opening monologue. He's timing jokes with the orchestra. He's coordinating with stage managers, lighting technicians, and musical directors. He's balancing comedic timing with royal etiquette, a tightrope that requires precision. He's memorizing introductions for performers with names from every corner of the globe. He's checking with producers about cues, camera angles, blocking, pacing, and run-of-show details. Hosting the royal variety performance isn't just stepping on stage and riffing for a couple of hours. It's an intricate dance of humor, timing, responsibility, and respect. Hosts are chosen because they know how to maintain dignity while making the audience feel at ease. They're trusted because they understand the seriousness beneath the sparkle. So when Jason received that first request, the one bearing Meghan's name, he didn't see glitz or gossip. He saw risk. And not the fun kind of risk comedians use for punchlines. The kind that destroys broadcasts, derails shows, overshadows talent, tarnishes the reputation of everyone involved. Let's reconstruct the moment. Jason is handed the inquiry. He reads the name. His expression changes, just slightly, just enough to reveal his internal reaction. Because Jason knows exactly what Meghan brings with her. Public attention, media intensity, narrative disruptions, and unpredictable aftershocks. He also knows what the palace wants this year. Stability, respect, control, a calm, polished, controversy-free performance. Those two things cannot coexist. And so Jason gave his answer. A simple, firm, unshakable. No, absolutely not. But here's the twist most people don't know. Jason didn't simply reject the request. He explained why. That explanation would later be repeated quietly among producers. We can't let the attention shift. This show is for the performers. Not someone trying to hijack the narrative. We've worked too hard on this. We're not turning it into a circus. Jason's words weren't angry. They weren't dramatic. They were practical. They were protective. They were the words of someone who understood the stakes more deeply than anyone expected. And the committee immediately aligned with him. They backed him. They repeated his stance in internal messages. They cited his authority in updated memos. Jason's decision became the backbone of the production's unified response. But here's where the story turns. Because while Jason's refusal stabilized the committee, it didn't stop Meghan's team. If anything, it triggered something worse, a second attempt, more calculated, more strategic, more insistent. This is where the emotional tension for Jason began. Because for every event like this, there's a point where decisions are no longer simple, where the job becomes heavier, where the lines blur, where protecting the show means stepping into territory that feels deeply uncomfortable. Jason reached that point the moment the second request arrived. This wasn't an accidental inquiry anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a polite question. This was persistence, pressure, an attempt to circumvent boundaries. And when the committee forwarded the second message to Jason, with more urgency, more concern, his internal reaction changed. The first time, he'd been confident. Now he was frustrated. Because this wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the integrity of the show. Jason sat down with key producers. He reviewed the security implications. He discussed the optics. He asked questions, detailed ones, about what would happen if Meghan arrived unexpectedly. And the answers were bleak. Camera crews would abandon performers to chase her. Press attention would shift entirely. Royal aides would panic. The red carpet would choke with photographers. The timeline would collapse. The broadcast could begin late. The palace might interpret the chaos as disrespect. Social media would explode, not about the event, but about Meghan. In Jason's mind, the math was simple. One person's visibility. The collapse of everything everyone had worked for. So he doubled down. But here's where things get complicated. Because this time, Jason didn't just say no. He took action. He scheduled an urgent call with senior producers. He requested a security briefing. He insisted that the palace liaison be looped in. He outlined the potential consequences. He pushed for clear boundaries. He demanded written confirmation of protocols. Jason Manford, the comedian, had become the enforcer. He didn't enjoy it. He didn't want the role. But he accepted it because someone had to. Now imagine Meghan's team at the same time. They weren't hearing no. They were hearing not yet. They interpreted the refusal as negotiable. Flexible. Something they could work around through charm, persistence, or alternative pathways. So while Jason was strengthening barriers, Meghan's team was scouting for cracks. A PR consultant made a phone call. A stylist reached out to a media contact. A representative tried to speak with a lower-level coordinator. A friendly figure in the entertainment world made quiet inquiries. Each time the committee caught wind of these attempts, the tension rose. But the breaking point. The moment Jason realized this wasn't just an inconvenience, but a full-blown threat, came during a late afternoon meeting the day before dress rehearsal. Producers informed him that Meghan's team had located a potential side entry route, a backdoor red carpet integration point normally used for last-minute celebrity arrivals, and they were considering using it. Without approval, without clearance, without protocol, without permission. Jason's reaction was immediate. We shut that down. Now. He didn't laugh. He didn't soften. He didn't shrug it off. He spoke with the tone of someone who knew that if he didn't take control, the entire event would spiral. Security teams were alerted. Access points were updated. Camera operators were informed. Stage managers were warned. A new internal directive was issued. And at the bottom, in clear print, the note. Per host, J. Manford, no unauthorized arrivals will be permitted under any circumstance. Jason didn't just say no anymore. He enforced no. He owned no. He embodied no. But the story doesn't end there. Because while Jason tightened security, Meghan's team wasn't finished. Not even close. Their next move would transform this from a backstage problem into a near crisis. A move so unexpected, so bold, that even Jason, the calm, composed professional, would be caught off guard. What did Meghan try next? Well, that's the twist that changes everything. What if the real power at a royal event isn't held by the monarch, the producers, or even the palace itself, but by the comedian hired to keep the audience laughing? Strange question, right? But Chapter 2 begins with exactly that contradiction, because in 2025, during the most controlled, most delicate, most tightly monitored royal variety performance in years, Jason Manford unexpectedly found himself holding a level of influence Meghan Markle never anticipated. And it wasn't because he demanded it. It wasn't because he craved authority. It wasn't even because he had some secret rivalry with her. No, it was because the structure of the night, the pressure behind the scenes, and the fragile tone of the monarchy had accidentally positioned him as the last line of defense. So let me ask you a direct question. Did you ever imagine a comedian, a man known for jokes, relatability, and warm-hearted charm, would one day stand between Meghan Markle and a red carpet she was determined to walk? Because that's exactly what happened. But before we get to the moment Jason said no, we need to understand why he had the power to say it. Because it wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. And it definitely wasn't an accident. It was structure. It was protocol. It was a year of behind-the-scenes decisions that placed Jason at the center of everything. Let's rewind to the start of the year. Months before the show, when the Royal Variety Production Committee gathered to discuss a major problem. The monarchy needed a successful event. Not an okay one. Not a decent one. A flawless one. A night with no scandals, no surprises, no negative headlines. One wrong moment could overshadow the entire program, derail public confidence, and create an international media storm. So the committee made a bold decision. Increase host authority. Not publicly, not in a flashy way, but structurally. Behind the scenes, the host would be given special control over the tone, timing, backstage movement, and, most importantly, red carpet integration. Why? Because hosts determine pacing. They determine energy. They determine how smooth the broadcast feels. And if something unpredictable disrupted that flow, the host needed authority to shut it down immediately. This meant Jason Manford, by the time he signed his contract, had more influence than almost any previous host in decades. Now here's where things get interesting. Jason didn't ask for more power. He didn't flaunt it. He didn't even talk about it. But the producers knew. The palace knew. And the event directors definitely knew. They needed a stabilizing force. Someone who could keep the night grounded while appearing effortlessly lighthearted. Someone who could keep the audience comfortable, the performers confident, and the monarchy firmly in the spotlight. Jason was perfect. And here's the irony. Meghan Markle had no idea any of this was in place when she allegedly attempted her red carpet maneuver. She saw the royal variety performance through a different lens, a glamorous, international, red carpet-heavy event with massive media turnout and enormous visibility potential. In Hollywood terms, it looked like an opportunity, a stage, a moment. But to Jason, it was responsibility, pressure, a duty to maintain order. He wasn't thinking about celebrity. He wasn't thinking about drama. He wasn't thinking about who could generate headlines. He was thinking about timing, rehearsal blocks, security schedules, seating arrangements, stage cues, comedic pacing, and, perhaps most importantly, The palace's strict sensitivity about overshadowing their chosen guest of honor. That's the quiet truth most people don't know. The host isn't just a smile for the camera. They're part of the machinery that keeps the entire event from collapsing in real time. Now let's dig deeper into Jason himself. Because if you don't understand his personality, you won't understand why his reaction to Meghan's request was so decisive. Jason Manford is known for three things. His friendliness. He's approachable, grounded, and beloved by audiences who see him as one of us. His sense of responsibility. He takes professionalism seriously, perhaps more seriously than people assume from a comedian. His boundary setting, something fans love about him. He doesn't sugarcoat disrespect or manipulation. He's not cruel. He's not petty. He's not dramatic. But he has a limit. And as the royal variety producers would later discover, Meghan's team accidentally crossed it. Let's picture the scene. It's a week before the show. Jason is running through monologue drafts, practicing timing, coordinating with the orchestra, and rehearsing introductions for performers. He's relaxed, focused, in work mode, not celebrity mode. Then a producer approaches him with a concerned look, holding a printed inquiry, the request for a paparazzi bolt-on ticket associated with Meghan Markle. Jason's reaction wasn't shock. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't curiosity. It was irritation, the quiet, grounded kind that says, "Why is this even being brought to me?" Because he understood instantly what this could mean. He understood that such a high-visibility arrival would dominate the media narrative, overshadowing the actual performers, overshadowing the royal attendees, overshadowing the tone he was hired to maintain. He also understood that the palace would not want this, that producers would not want this, that the event's charity partners would not want this, that performers, many of whom had traveled internationally for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, would not want this. A surprise Meghan Markle arrival? That would become the entire story. And Jason wasn't willing to let that happen on his watch. But here's where the contradiction hits hardest. Jason didn't dislike Meghan personally. He didn't have a grudge. He didn't have an agenda. He had a job, a massive job, and the appearance of someone as polarizing and high-intensity as Meghan threatened everything he had spent months preparing for. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in charge of something important? A project, an event, a performance? And suddenly someone tries to insert themselves into it, knowing full well their presence could derail the whole thing? That's exactly how Jason felt. Protective, focused, dutiful. And when he learned that Meghan's team wasn't just requesting access, but requesting an enhanced red carpet pass designed for maximum media exposure, that sealed it. Because the paparazzi bolt-on isn't subtle. It isn't accidental. It isn't background access. It's full exposure. It's intentional visibility. It's a spotlight grab. And that was the one thing Jason could not allow. So he said no. Not casually, not timidly, but firmly, calmly, decisively. A decision that rippled through the entire production staff like a shockwave. Because when a host vetoes something of this magnitude, everyone takes it seriously. Yet the real twist, the one that would light the fuse of the coming chaos, wasn't Jason's refusal. It was Meghan's response.